This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. It is NFL Draft Week. The first round will take place Thursday night, second and third rounds on Friday night, and rounds 4 through 7 on Saturday. One of my favorite times of the year, and one of my favorite coworkers at Buckeye Scoop, Tony Gerdeman, comes on to talk about the NFL draft and specifically where Ohio State players are going to go. With me, Tony, thanks for joining the show. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Alex. This is definitely one of my sports holidays every year. Growing up, this was just as big for me as March Madness and any other sports holiday that you throw out there. And it used to just be like the one long day of just sitting, getting in front of the TV by like noon on a Saturday or whatever, and just forcing you. We used to, in fact, Alex, back in the day, we would even go to the bar and ask them to put the draft on, and get some really weird looks when you're asking people to turn on the draft at a bar.
Yeah, well, you're a Bears fan. I'm a Jets fan. So the draft might as well be the Super Bowl every year. So, you know, those people, they must be, I don't know, in the 90s Cowboys fans, or maybe they're Packers fans or something along those lines, where they just don't understand why people like me and you would care about the draft so much. But, you know, it's always good to see where Ohio State guys who, you know, I follow since they're in high school, you follow, I mean, that long as well, but more closely than me when they're at Ohio State. It's always good to see kind of where they go and where they get drafted. Always better when it's higher and it's a nice surprise. Like, you know, someone like a Pete Werner was, but this year's an interesting year for Ohio State. I think there's a couple guys in Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave who, you know, don't want to jinx anything, knock on wood, but are pretty much first round locks. But then there's a group of guys who really could go anywhere from rounds 2 to 7 to maybe even undrafted. We're going to talk about them today. We're also going to take a look ahead at next year's draft class, or possible draft class from Ohio State. We'll see how some of those third year guys or fourth year redshirted guys end up. Well, I guess they still have the COVID year. So even a fourth year guy who played all 4 years can still come back, but we'll see who ends up going. But we'll talk about some of those and the draft prospects of a number of the players on this year's team. But let's start with the two guys we mentioned in the front, Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, two excellent wide receivers. Honestly, like, not just Ohio State bias. All my friends tell me it's Ohio State bias all the time when I say that I want the Jets to take Garrett Wilson at number 10 over Drake London or Jamison Williams. But I just think these two guys are really, really safe picks. They're not only very talented players, but they're very safe picks. I mean, Drake London had a big year last year. He had the injury, you know, which took him out for a good chunk of the season. And I think there are some question marks about him. And then Jamison Williams had an excellent year at Alabama after showing sparks at Ohio State, but never really becoming the guy. And he transferred because he couldn't beat out Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and more importantly, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who will be in next year's draft class, more than likely. You know, so I don't think it's biased at all. I think these guys are really, really safe prospects. I think they're going to be really good NFL players. You look at what Terry McLaurin has become in the NFL. I like to tell my friends, Chris Olave, I think to me is going to be a better version of Terry McLaurin. And I don't really know who to compare Garrett Wilson to, but he could do it all, inside, outside. He clearly had the speed, what you saw from the 40. He's got great hands, usually. And he's just a surefire thing to me. So, Tony, I guess looking at those two guys, who do you think is going to go first out of the two of them? And where do you think each of them are going to go?
Yeah, I'm on board with Garrett Wilson going first. I think he's a number one receiver and that he can be your number one. I have some concerns about Chris Olave, maybe somewhere between a 1.5 and a 2 in terms of being your number one receiver, being the complimentary guy who can still put up 1,200 yards, but you need a stud on the other side of him. But yeah, I think Garrett Wilson goes first. And you see Atlanta a lot. Let me ask you, because you being the Jets guy, would you be okay? Because there's a chance he's not going to be there at 10 for you. Are you okay jumping him at 4 and then picking up defense or whatever it's?
No. That's 4 is too early. I mean, look, 4 is reserved for a Calvin Johnson-esque type of player who I believe did he go 1,
3,
2, top 3 for sure. I don't think that he is that good.
Right.
I think he can be a 1, but I think he's like a 1B, if you will. I don't think he's, I don't think he's Michael Thomas good in the NFL. But I think he's a really good player who on a team like, I guess I would have never thought Cooper Kupp would be a 1 either, but look what he's become. So, I mean, he could be a 1. He'd be an amazing 2, but I think he's so safe that for a team like the Jets, who needs playmakers on the offensive side of the ball to surround Zach Wilson with, I think he'd be a great fit in with what they already have on that roster with Elijah Moore, Corey Davis, Braxton Berrios, a few other guys. I think he'd kind of be able to become number 1 receiver. But I wouldn't take him at 4. I think I'm with you. I think Garrett goes before. I think Atlanta at 8 is a really good slot for him. I think he's going to go to the Jets at 10.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get past the Jets. And my whole problem with this entire draft is I don't love it. I barely like it. And I think if there are guys you like, then this is one of those drafts where you're going to have to reach. You're going to have to draft them ahead of where they are, because I don't know how much trading down there's going to be, because the teams down lower may like where they are and don't want to trade up. And so you kind of have to grab when you have an opportunity. Like with me being a Bears fan, they have no first round picks and they've got 2 seconds, but you may have to grab somebody with that second round pick because you don't have another pick until like the 70s. So you may be picking somebody at 49 that you have at 65 on the board, but it's because you don't know, like Nick Petit-Frere. You don't know if he's going to be there. Do you want to tackle? Do you think he's the best one on your board? You're going to have to grab him. But back to your question, like I don't think Garrett Wilson gets past 10. And then you see Chris Olave with the Saints quite a bit. I wouldn't mind seeing him. I think it would be fun to see him in Buffalo. And because he can stretch the field, they've got a quarterback that can do the same. And the one thing that Chris Olave is just always smooth, gets open, doesn't look like he should be able to do all of the things he does, but tremendous route runner, obviously, you know that. And you wonder with all of these receivers, somebody's going to have to fall. And I wonder if somebody's going to fall out of the first round. And then do you see maybe some teams coming up to try to trade back up late into that first round to get somebody like Chris Olave if he's falling. But I wouldn't mind also seeing him, Green Bay or somewhere like that, where you've got a quarterback that is in need of weapons, or maybe KC as they look to replace their losses there. But yeah, I agree. I think they're both in the first round. You wonder what teams like which receivers best, and maybe they already have a Chris Olave and they want somebody bigger like a Treylon Burks.
Yeah, I just don't think he gets past Green Bay at 22. I think I just can't see him going past there. I think Philly could be a possibility. They got those 2 picks. I think the Chargers, while they probably want to go offensive line, I think that could be a really good situation. Surround Justin Herbert with some more talent. Because right now, to me, he's doesn't have many playmakers on the offensive side of the ball. So that's an interesting one. I mean, the Saints, the Jets, the Commanders, and the Vikings could all go receiver 10, 11, 12. Seattle could decide to turn around and trade DK Metcalf and end up going receiver. Dallas just traded Amari Cooper. I mean, they might, if Chris Olave is sitting there at 24, I don't think he's going to go past Green Bay. And, New England, they wouldn't surprise me either. I think that Saints, they have those 2 picks, 16 and 19. I'll say they grab him at 19, which would be a great spot for him. Wish he had a better quarterback, but being able to team up with Michael Thomas, hopefully a healthy Michael Thomas would, I think, allow Olave to get open a bit, and maybe Jameis can hit him instead of the opposing team with his passes. So the question I have, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you taking a quarterback in the first round of this draft, or are you going to try to wait till next year?
I would not.
If I'm in the top 10 now and I know I'm not going to be good next year, like I'm not necessarily tanking, but I'm going to see if I can get somebody next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think, those, especially those early round picks, you got to be really sure about that guy because that's going to set you back 3 years if he's not the guy. I mean, the Jets are the Jets, but Sam Darnold, you gave him 2-3 years, really. I mean, that sets you back because you just can't move forward. We'll see what happens with Zach Wilson. I feel like they're doing it at least the right way this time and putting the kid in position to succeed. And hopefully the Bears do that with Justin Fields moving forward because they haven't thus far. But we'll see what happens. The question I have for you before we move on to the other guys, Jamison Williams tore his ACL in the championship game. They're saying he's going to be ready for the season. I know he showed that he was more than a one-trick pony this year for sure. I still think versus the other 3 receivers that are expected to go in the first round, he is still somewhat of a one-trick pony. And I think it's all about fit for him. I don't think he could come in and be the number one for every single route. I think you got to pair him with a really good receiver so that you could utilize his vertical speed. Do you think he goes before Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson? Do you think they sandwich him? Do you think he kind of falls and they go, he goes after them?
I think he will go before Olave. And my issue with what Jamison Williams did at Alabama is that any of the Ohio State receivers could have gone there and done that, where, it was just basically him and John Mechie and what Slade Bolden and they had a really good offense. And the way he just would run free, I don't know how often he was tested. And I know he played in the SEC, but he made that conference look silly at times. So give him credit. But I think Chris Olave could have done very similar. I think Garrett Wilson would have put up huge numbers there. I think, of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba doing what he did at Ohio State. So I do view him as a lesser receiver than those guys, or, at least Ohio State did. So, but I still think that he goes ahead of Olave because he did produce and he did look amazing. And he was the best player on the Alabama team for most of the season. So offensively, at least. And so that has to mean something.
Yeah. I do think he'll end up going. I think he'll end up going after Garrett and before Chris as well. Don't ask me to tell you where, because I'm not really sure, but maybe Philly at 15, something like that. Maybe Baltimore at 14. We'll see, but it will be interesting to watch nonetheless. Moving on, you got a few guys. We're going to go a little bit more rapid fire. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Buckeyes who I expect to be drafted at some point over the 3-day event. There's a few others who I guess are technically in the mix, but Nick Petit-Frere, Jeremy Ruckert, Thayer Munford, Tyreke Smith, and Haskell Garrett. Let's go real quick on predictions for rounds for each of these. Offensive tackle, Nicholas Petit-Frere. What do you got, Tony?
I think he could jump into the second if there's a run, and if there isn't a run, then I think you can grab him in the third. And it's kind of surprising to see, looking at CBS's rankings recently and seeing like Rasheed Walker ranked ahead of him and Daniel Alele ahead of him as well. And I kind of shake my head at that. But I think if there's a run, you could sneak him into the second.
Yeah, I think he's going to go in the third. Just kind of a gut feel. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what we've been hearing. That kind of. I mean, some people early on were saying, "Oh, maybe he goes late first." I don't think that's the case. I think at this point he's probably a late second, first half of the third round type of guy. I still think he's got a ton of upside and a high ceiling. Last year was a really good year for a while and then kind of ended poorly, but I know he was dealing with some injuries and things along those lines. So I still think, he hasn't played his best football yet. I think he's going to be a really great pick for someone in the first half of that third round.
If Bears get him at 71, I'll take it. I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, I think that would be a great pick. And you put him right in at right tackle from day one, I think. Let's go to a guy I've covered probably since he's a sophomore in high school, Jeremy Ruckert, out of Lindenhurst High School, 4-year player for Ohio State, played significantly all 4 years, basically was a starter his last 3 years. Where do you think Jeremy Ruckert goes?
I think he's a third rounder that could go in the second if a team that needs a tight end has a late second but doesn't have a third, and they want to go get the top guy on their board because he's one of the top 3 or 4 tight ends in the draft. So I'll say third round, early to mid third.
I'm going to go early 4th round for him. I would love for the Jets to take him at 111 or 117. They got 2 4th-round picks. Long Island kid, grew up a Jets fan. That would be his dream come true for sure. Although I think he'd love to go a little bit earlier than that. But, I just think there's some tight ends that are going to be taken probably in the second, at least Trey McBride for sure, probably. Maybe a couple others in that mix. And I don't know. I just have a feeling he goes in the 4th round. How about Thayer Munford? Interesting prospect. Could play guard, could play tackle. I know he's been working a little bit at center just to show his versatility. I think he's an NFL guard personally. Where do you have Thayer going?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that can just stay on a roster for a long time, but the back issues, the fact that teams view him as a guard, I'm, 5th, 6th, where he definitely has value, but where the upside, I think, is what keeps him out of the top 4-ish rounds.
Yeah, I found like historically, you just get more disappointed versus guys going earlier than you think they're going to go. And it's probably because we watch them so much versus the average fan or the scout who's watching like more team, like, you'd be like, oh, why wouldn't you take Thayer Munford? He's going to be a rock solid, like 2 deep guy, if nothing else, which he probably will be. But I actually think he's going to go in the 6th round. I think he's going to fall a bit. And I think it's going to be more so the health concerns over his play. I know he didn't have the best year at guard last year, but it was also his first year playing the position, really. I think with enough, the kid's shown that he'll work just as hard, if not harder than anyone else to reach his goals. I think he's got a chance to be an NFL starter at guard. And I think someone's going to be really happy they got good value in the 6th round, again, as long as that back holds up. So 2 more guys. Tyreke Smith, really interesting prospect, has shown flashes of greatness at times, hasn't really been able to stay healthy himself, but had a good Senior Bowl showing, and seems like the pro day and all the workouts or whatever went pretty well. What do you think about Tyreke Smith?
I think he's probably a 3-4 linebacker like Jonathan Cooper, Baron Browning. So I don't know that he's actually played the position that he will eventually be playing, because I don't know that he's a defensive end necessarily, and has never really produced when he's been healthy. He's gotten close and he does good things, but he's never been great. And I was looking at one rankings where he's ranked the number 115th prospect overall, which would put you like mid 4th, and that seems very high for me. I think he's somebody you take on reputation as being a Buckeye in like the 7th round. I don't know that I should Jonathan Cooper be drafted behind where Tyreke Smith ended up, and I think Jonathan Cooper was a 7th rounder last year.
Yep.
And I'd say he was more productive and meaningful than Tyreke Smith. So I'll say, 6th, 7th round, somebody will take a flyer, I guess.
Yeah, I think he's going to go earlier than that, actually. I just think kid with upside, athleticism, tests well. I think he's a little bit more suited for 4-3 end than those guys were. But because I don't know. I just don't think I don't think he'd do well in coverage. And I know a 3-4 linebacker ends up rushing majority of the time anyway. I don't know if he's that athletic as Cooper or Barron that in coverage, but I do agree he's a little bit of a tweener between a 3-4 linebacker and a 4-3 end. I just think the athleticism will get him into the 5th round, but I could see someone taking a flyer on him late 4th. I don't know if that will pay off, but I'm going to say first half of the 5th round for Tyreke Smith. Last guy, Haskell Garrett, heck of a season 2 years ago, kind of took a step back last year, took a little bit of a risk returning, did return. I know he dealt with some injuries of his own that kind of limited him to some extent. Where do you see Haskell Garrett going?
Thinking about this and talking with the scout recently, mentioning him, like there's not a lot that he does that stands out for scouts, like athletically, not that great, size, just average, like 6'2", 300, nothing special about what he does. And, I think he's got a really good, he's got some quickness at times, good first step, but can also disappear for a long time. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes undrafted. I'll say 7th because he has played in Ohio State, and that means something to a lot of GMs and scouts. So they'll look for the best parts of you and believe what coaches have to say. So then it becomes whatever the coaches said and what have opposing coaches said. So I'll say 7th, but I won't be shocked if he goes undrafted.
Yeah, I'm going to go 6. I think he goes late 6th round. At that point, you're kind of trying to find those diamonds in the rough late that can be productive players for you, even if they're not starters. And you look at a guy like Haskell Garrett, veteran at Ohio State. He got the right training, developed correctly by Larry Johnson. He was really impactful 2 years ago, and definitely flashed at times last year. You probably dig into that and find out the truth and what the real is and why maybe he wasn't so productive. And I bet you that explanation is probably better than anything you or I can give, at least on the record. But this guy, I think about what he's done the last few years after getting shot in the face. I mean, that's incredible and shows resiliency, I think. So I just think someone in that like late 6th range is going to say, this kid, you know what you're getting in him. It's not a wild card. I know you might want to go higher ceiling guys at that point, but if you just want a guy who's going to come in, do things the right way, push your guys in practice, provide some depth along the defensive line, be able to come in and give you some quality snaps right away and not have to learn too much, I think he's your guy. So 6th round for him. Take
Grab
the last
him with a compensatory pick.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. Didn't even cost you anything. Wasn't even planned for. So moving on, last thing I want to look at with you, Tony, 2023 draft prospects. I think we could all probably agree Jackson Smith and Jigba and CJ Stroud, this is probably their last hurrah at Ohio State, knock on wood, pending they're healthy, produce as expected. Both of those guys agree 1st round type of talents, but there's a few guys who I just want to get your take on. Mm-hmm. A, do you think they're coming out after this year? Early predictions. And B, what type of draft prospect would you give him? We'll do it rapid fire real quick. Dejuan Jones.
Yeah, I think he's done after this year and can be a 2nd, 3rd round guy. And if he could be 1st if he's outstanding, obviously.
Yeah, I think playing right tackle hurts a little bit for your 1st round draft prospects. There are guys who do that, but I think he comes out. I think he's going to be in a similar range of Nick Petit-Frere as far as, is he 2nd? Is he early 3rd? But either way, that will be good enough for him to leave.
How does he look against speed rushers? That'll be a big question too.
Yeah, we know the Michigan game didn't serve him too well last year, so it'll be interesting to see how this year goes. Matt Jones, the other Jones on the Ohio State offensive line, he technically has 2 more years left. This will be his 1st year as a full-time starter for Ohio State. Do you think he leaves after this year?
These 5th-year guys who have been around and they're just ready to go, like you're done with school, you're ready to leave. But I think having 2 years as a full-time starter would do him well. So I wouldn't be shocked if he stays. You are much more tied into what that situation is than I am, but I think it would help him to stay.
Yeah, I think Matt's going to leave as long as he has a solid year, which I think he will. I think he's going to have a really good year. It's not like he doesn't have film before. I mean, he started in the national championship game 2 years ago. He's, probably started at least 10 games in his career and should start minimum of 12, if not 13, 14, 15, 16 this year. I think he's going to go. He'll probably end up being a mid-round pick, maybe like a 4th round pick. But this is a guy who, if he's going to make money, it's going to be on the 2nd contract, probably no matter what. I just don't know if staying is going to really elevate his status that much. So I think the intent, I could tell you the intent is to have a great year and leave, but we'll see how things happen. How about Paris Johnson moving from guard to left tackle where he really belongs? What's your thoughts on Paris?
I think it's really good news for Ohio State if he ends up playing well enough to leave. I think that's the plan. I think his plan is a 3-year plan, and now it's up to him to make that work. And I'm not going to put too much stock in the spring game or and get into that. But I think if he plays like he believes he will, he's gone. Yeah,
I think it's the double-edged sword. You see fans on our site and our boards arguing all the time about no way he leaves. It's so rare for tackle to leave after 3 years. This would be his 1st year at tackle. You don't want him to leave, but you want him to leave. Because as you said, Tony, that means he's that good, which is 1 year starting at left tackle. NFL prospects think so highly of him. that, he's good enough to leave. I think he does leave. I think he's going to have a great year. And I think there's a possibility he's a first round pick. If I had to say today, gun to my head, I'd probably say second round pick just to be safe, because again, the limited film at left tackle. But I think he's got first round potential. So I think whenever he leaves, there's a great chance he could be a first round pick, and it might be next year. A guy who I'm almost certain will leave, that maybe could have left this year, but I think just one more hurrah is Zach Harrison, defensive end. What do you think about Zach's future draft prospects?
Yeah, I think he's done after this year. And I know he's been projected as a first rounder forever. And I know that's fans are probably saying no way now, but if you look at what Trayvon Walker did at Georgia, which isn't much, and even this past year, he had like 6 sacks and 7.5 tackles for loss. And he's now like the favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. I can see a scenario where Zach Harrison has very similar numbers to that, and then goes to the combine and wows people and ends up being in the first round. I still think you kind of continue to project him, and it's like, well, eventually the numbers need to be there. And so that's why I'm probably thinking, second or third. You look at Jason Owe a couple of years ago as a first rounder with no sacks in 2020. So there's still ways for a guy that doesn't produce that much to get up there, but I'll say second round, that area, second, third round, and the possibility of obviously being a first rounder. You?
Yeah, I think I'm on the Zach Harrison believer train. I just think eventually this guy, it's going to click. I think maybe with the Jim Knowles defense, I don't know, less distractions, just go pin your ears back and get the quarterback. I think the light bulb's just going to come on eventually. We've seen it come on at times, and I think this is the year Zach finally breaks through. I don't know if he's going to be a first rounder. Again, gun to my head, I'd probably say second rounder. But that would be really good news for Ohio State if he was a second round pick, because clearly he was probably being told he's going to be a fourth rounder later type of guy this year. But I think I agree with you. He's going to test out the wazoo. He's going to have a fast 40. He's going to jump high. He's going to, the broad jump's going to be great. I'm sure he'll lift decently. He's just got to put it on film. So I'm a believer. Let's jump to Cam Brown, cornerback, guy who's been in and out of the lineup because of injuries, but when he's played, he's been pretty productive. What do you think about Cam Brown? Yeah,
well, that's one of those things where if he has a full healthy season, you get out of Dodge and you leave early, like a Marshawn Lattimore, where you were healthy all year after not being healthy at any point in your career. And do you decide to then go, or do you want to prove to people, no, I can stay healthy by staying another year? So I think if he plays as well as he is expected and stays healthy, then he's done and enters the draft. And he's another guy that's going to run really well at the combine. So I think with the year that he expects, and all cornerbacks expect to be great. So I think he leaves after this year.
Yeah, me too. And I think he could surprise people and be somewhat of a surprise first round pick if he plays the way I think he's capable. But again, I think next year, I mean, you'll have Stroud and JSN, then you have a lot of guys who have the potential to be first round picks, but probably end up in that 2 to 4 range. So we'll see what happens there. Last guy I'll go to, I mean, I know there's Ronnie Hickman, there's Noah Ruggles, who I had originally, but for the sake of time, wanted to jump to Josh Proctor. Just all the hype coming out of high school, looked awesome on special teams his first year. It just either hasn't clicked. He hasn't been able to stay healthy. He's looked great. He's gotten hurt. Where do you see Josh Proctor's 2022 season going?
It's going to be interesting watching him at strong safety and Jim Knowles defense. And it's going to put a lot of good guys on display to do well. And I think that position suits him well, puts him close to the line of scrimmage, but also he'll be able to show his ability to run and cover ground. Would still have another year if he wants it. So I think he's a very confident guy that if he plays like he wants to, he could leave. But again, it's one of those things where safeties aren't all that coveted. It's going to be very hard to get into the first round. And then it becomes a situation of, well, if you're going to be a second rounder this year, you're probably going to be a second rounder next year as well. Like, it's going to be hard to improve your stock And so you go when the getting is good. And I could see that, especially another guy who's dealt with injuries. Here's your opportunity. Don't blow it. Don't risk coming back and getting hurt again.
Yeah. To me, if he's ever going to have a good year, it's going to be this year. The new system's in place, safety friendly. He could be aggressive in this defense. I think they're going to move him around a lot. They're going to blitz him. They're going to play him in the box. They're going to play him deep. I just think he's going to showcase a lot of the skill set. And I thought he looked really, really good when he was healthy last year. I think he was going to be the best player, potentially be the best player on that defense. Not that was saying much, but I think he could be that best player again this year. And I don't think he's a first round guy. There's the injury questions and all that. Could he be Jaquan Brisker this year is a second round pick. I think Josh Proctor is more talented, more physically gifted than Jaquan Brisker. And I think when healthy, Jaquan Brisker is a very good football player, but I think Josh Proctor, just with his freaky athleticism and ability to hit and cover, I just think he's a better football player when healthy than Jaquan Brisker. So I think he could be a second round guy. I'm really excited to see what he could do this year. Really what all the safeties could do, because Ronnie Hickman can play himself into, second, third round pick next year as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next year, but focuses on this year, NFL draft, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We'll have full coverage of all the Ohio State guys on Buckeye Scoop. So definitely stay tuned to that. Tony, thanks for joining. Listeners, always appreciate it. We'll see you next week.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Renovation Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.